All right, we just had a massive authoritarianism red flag. It was something that was kind of snuck into a deal that happened, but it is a significant step towards fascism and authoritarianism in the United States. Nippon Steel just purchased U.S. Steel in a merger agreement, $15 billion. This was hotly contested because obviously the idea of a United States Steel being sold to a foreign company was not something that was appealing. In order to close the deal, they gave the president and his successors something they called a golden share. And the golden share allows the president to have significant stake in decisions and, most importantly, veto power over certain things that happen in the company. This is called nationalizing companies. This and that is what it looks like when authoritarians nationalize companies. This happened in every authoritarian country. And if I'm being super honest with you, I did not expect that this would happen here this quickly. But the golden share was obviously what they thought they had to do to get this deal passed. And it passed, and they approved it. And now the president of the United States has basically a seat on the board and veto power over key corporate decisions in order to make this happen. Obviously, the unsaid part is that probably it wouldn't have happened without this. The golden share is being sold as played off as this like way to keep U.S. Steel in the United States control, that sort of thing. But make no mistake, it is a form of nationalizing companies. Authoritarians nationalize companies. This will not be the last.
We are in deep shit. When I say that we are in deep shit, we are in deep shit. You see these four right here? These are CEOs, COOs from Palantir, Meta, and OpenAI, multi-billionaires who are being sworn into our U.S. Army reserves as lieutenant colonels. So Commander Bonespur and Pete Kegsbreath came up with a new detachment called Detachment 201, the Army's Executive Innovation Corps, or EIC. Last I checked, when anyone wants to join the military, they have to go through basic training, they have to go through MOS training, they also have to go through a background check to be able to obtain a security clearance, whether it's secret or top secret. But yet, we're giving these four billionaires who are in charge of monitoring our information, our data, through Meta, through Palantir, and OpenAI, we're giving them the key to our defense. They are being sworn in as lieutenant motherfucking colonels, lieutenant colonels. Whereas for some of us who actually served, it takes us years and years and years, up to maybe 25 years just to get that rank, just to be able to obtain that rank. So on June 13th, the Army announced the creation of Detachment 201, otherwise known as the Executive Innovation Corps, which it describes as a new initiative designed to fuse cutting-edge tech expertise with military innovation. 4 ultra-wealthy executives from top tech companies were sworn into the unit ahead of President Trump's heavily promoted military parade, which was itself sponsored by Palantir. The Army's top spokesman declared that the Detachment 201 was being created to bring in tech innovation executive leaders to help the Army with the recruitment and the subsequent training of tech-focused people. So if it's not bad enough that we've got these 4 CEOs here that are in charge of meddling and having access to our private information, now they're going into the military and now they're going to use AI technology. This is a direct control of military innovation. This would include AI surveillance, cyber weapons, and autonomous drones. So now Trump and Pete Kegsbreath are trying to weaponize our military by the use of these super wealthy CEOs from OpenAI, Meta, and Palantir. And with the rank that they are obtaining, they have control over their subordinates. Sergeants, sergeants first class, first sergeants, and command sergeant majors. They have more rank than those that have already served. And these motherfuckers didn't even go through training. This is what happens when you elect a motherfucking clown and you get a circus in return.
You're learning so many important things, and I'm so proud of you.
You cast your ballot in a democracy on election day, but on every other day, you clock into a dictatorship. America isn't a democracy. It's a collection of private sector fiefdoms. Companies aren't democracies. Offices are not democracies. You supposedly want to export democracy all around the world, because supposedly it's the most wonderful model of governance there is. But you'll never export democracy across the threshold of an office building, across the threshold of a company. You pretend that you want to spread democracy to every corner of the globe, but you will never spread democracy into your own private sector. Leave your democracy at the door. When you punch in at work, you punch out of your democracy. And you enter into a purely authoritarian governance model. And that's where most people spend most of their time. And now, even your own government, your supposedly democratic government, well, they're punching in too. They're clocking in too to that same authoritarian corporate private system. I don't think you take this seriously enough. I think maybe people think that this is hyperbole. It's not. This isn't some sort of exaggerated rant complaining about the system. This is an objective assessment of what kind of a system you have. What's governing your country? What's governing your lives? You make business a no-go zone for democracy, a no-go zone for accountability and for any sort of restrictions or limitations and so on. And it grew and grew and grew in unchecked power until it captured your state. I mean, you really need to try to understand this structurally, the reality of this and the ramifications of this. Look, I can give you an example. It's a good example in terms of the ramifications of giving business the privileged, untouchable status that you gave them, that you gave business. Okay? Did you know that right now in China, they are developing a nuclear reactor that uses thorium instead of uranium? It's still in the testing phase, but so far so good. This is going to potentially mean almost unlimited cheap energy production that is environmentally safe, that's clean, and that's stable. Now, once that first reactor is well tested and well confirmed, China is obviously going to expand and replicate that across their country. And they will almost definitely also help spread that technology to BRICS members, replicate it among BRICS members too. That means energy self-sufficiency across the global south with little to no with little to no environmental fallout. We're talking about potentially phasing out completely fossil fuels. I mean, obviously petroleum products will still be necessary, will still be needed, will still be used, but over the long term, in terms of fuel, with technological advancement, eventually you're probably even going to have electric aircraft, just like you have electric cars. The point is, China is rapidly progressing towards clean, cheap, nearly infinite energy production, okay? But the United States was working on this before China was, decades ago. But they completely abandoned that research in the 1960s. Tell me why. Because it's not particularly conducive to weaponization. That's why. Because America's economy was driven by the military-industrial complex. So if something couldn't facilitate war and killing, it was deprioritized. Imagine, you could have potentially had clean, unlimited energy decades ago. But weapons manufacturers and the Pentagon did not think that that was as important as missile production, as the nuclear arms race that brought the world to the precipice of annihilation more than once. That's what your private sector supremacy has done for humanity. I mean, just think of the toll of all of the conflicts driven by the desire to control oil and gas over the last 50 years. It's staggering. And you did that, you pursued that, after deliberately abandoning the same research for alternative energy that China is producing today, or that is developing today. Why, you can't even fathom how much contempt they have for you, how much contempt they have for everyone on this planet. But of course that's how they are, because it's just business. The democracy-free zone, the values-free zone, the morality-free zone. It's only about profit and it's only about growth. And like I said, they have captured your government, and that's how your whole country is run now. That's how your whole society is run now, and you should have recognized that they never ever believed in so-called democracy. Like I said, the giveaway is that if democracy is humanity's crowning achievement in terms of governance, why is it so carefully fenced off from the place where most Americans spend 2/3 of their waking lives, the workplace? Why isn't it allowed there? Because the American project is actually a stack of authoritarianisms, nested like Russian dolls, the nation state stuffed inside of monopolies, which are stuffed inside of asset management behemoths, which are then in turn stuffed inside the national owners and controllers of global financialized capital, the OCGFC. Call it an empire if you like, but it's certainly not ruled by the people. You don't elect your CEO of your company. You don't choose your line manager. You don't have the recall power over the board of directors. If you try to exercise free speech at work, human resources is going to call it insubordination and escort you out. That's dictatorship. Corporations run on unilateral directives that cascade down, with compliance reports going up. And the human being in the cubicle, we all know, is just a cog in the machine, not a citizen. It's a cog in the machine. Your small company might have a charismatic founder, but ultimately, it's just a subsidiary of a private equity portfolio, which is itself just a rounding error on BlackRock's balance sheet. Each layer strips away another degree of self-determination, because capitalhood is authoritarian. It naturally seeks to colonize the public sphere. Money doesn't just talk, it dictates, it decrees. Congress is nothing but the customer service desk for the Fortune 500. The presidency is just a brand ambassadorship. The Supreme Court is nothing but a dispute resolution hotline. If representative democracy is supposedly the best system for stewarding human potential, then why is it systematically denied where human potential is actively utilized in the factories, in the companies, in the offices, and so on? While you work in what can only be called a medieval governance structure inside of your so-called democracy. I mean, if we apply middle nation relative power measurements to the private sector in America, it's stark. Decision authority in a firm, managers score 10, workers score 0. Narrative control, well, corporate media, the budgets for corporate media dwarf civic education. Immunity to retaliation, well, too big to fail, too big to jail. That's exactly what that is. Means that they are completely immune to retaliation or accountability. Run the relative power index, the middle nation relative power index on the U.S., and you will find that the public sector trends to subservience to private empires. That's textbook state capture. And I've been telling you that the military-industrial complex that used to feed itself by sowing chaos and sowing bloodshed overseas, but is now being overruled by the national OCGFC, who no longer want the global South to be destabilized by violence. They don't want it to be destabilized by horror anymore. I've been telling you that they're going to bring their operations home. Didn't I tell you that? Well, look at California right now. Look at Los Angeles. What else do you think that is besides violent colonization turning inward? You think this is about immigration law? You think ICE is enforcing laws? No. They are marauders and you are the loot. ICE is not a law enforcement agency. It is a mercenary force under contract to private corporations, hunting human beings for profit. That's all it is. That's exactly what it is. They work for the private prison industry. Your so-called immigration department is just a subsidiary. It's an interface for the private prison industry. That's what it is. That's what you turned it into. These aren't arrests that they're making. These are profit-making activities that they're engaged in. Every detention is a paycheck. Every deportation is a dividend. Do you understand? They're not police. They're pirates. They're pillagers. This isn't policy. This is commerce. You're witnessing the logistics arm of what can only really be called an ethnic cleansing operation outsourced to the highest bidder. Yes, I said ethnic cleansing because do you really believe that this isn't racial? Do you really think that this has anything whatsoever to do with someone's immigration paperwork? We know who they're targeting and we know why. And if you have any sense, you'll also understand that this practice is going to do nothing but expand, just like any business expands. That's what businesses do. It means they're going after immigrants now. This is a pilot project. They normalize it by targeting immigrants. But this is a profit-making endeavor. And you'd have to be crazy to think that they're not going to multiply their revenue streams by targeting other demographics. Non-citizens and citizens, so-called minorities, members of the global majority, the poor, the homeless, the protesters. This doesn't go anywhere but expansion. They've turned immigration enforcement into a business model. They've turned it into a supply chain. You've got militarized raids rounding up immigrants like livestock, funneling them into for-profit prisons, slapping electronic shackles on their ankles, and shipping them out on corporate charter flights like Amazon parcels. I mean, they literally said that. They literally said that they want to run deportations like Amazon Prime. That wasn't satire. That was the ICE director's actual analogy. And you know what? He wasn't inaccurate. He was being accurate. Does Amazon care what's in the box? No, neither does ICE. They don't care what's in the box. You're not a person, you're inventory. Now you may think, well, I'm not undocumented, so this isn't my problem. Wrong. Because this isn't just about who's being deported, it's about why this is being done the way it's being done in the first place. It's about who's in line next time when the migrants are not enough to satisfy the profit potential of their model. You understand me? The infrastructure right now is being built today. The data surveillance, the AI-powered raids, the indefinite detention laws, the elimination of due process, the criminalization of entire populations. This isn't going to stop with immigrants. You'd be crazy to think it is. Like I said, this is just a pilot project. It's going to be used on you. It's going to be used on your protesters. It's going to be used on your political dissidents. It's going to be used on whoever refuses to comply. It's a system of repression, not immigration. They're using wartime laws from 1798 to deport people without hearings. Wartime laws? What war? I don't see any war except for the one that the government itself is waging on their own population. And they're waging that on behalf of nothing but the private sector, on behalf of the empire of capital. Yes. Understand what I'm saying. Your country has been conquered. I don't know what you think I mean when I say that your country has been captured and your state has been captured. It's been conquered. It's been conquered by corporate power. Well, what does that make ICE? It's a colonial mercenary force, nothing, no more, no less. They don't protect communities. They invade communities and steal people. Where have we seen that before? I said they're marauders. This isn't law enforcement. I mean, let me say this with absolute clarity. The United States is in breach of international law. The UN has said it. Human rights experts have said it. Legal scholars have said it. Deporting asylum seekers without hearings? Illegal. Sending people to third countries that don't recognize them? Illegal. Holding civil detainees in solitary confinement for weeks at a time? Illegal. Medically abusing female detainees with unnecessary surgeries. That's illegal, that's criminal, that's barbaric. ICE detention facilities are the new Guantanamos for the domestic empire. These are the Amazon warehouses of captured human beings. Corporate contractors like Geo Group, like Core Civic, they're making billions of dollars from these cages, from this trauma, from this misery, from this terror. This is modern slavery packaged as homeland security. Down home. Whatever you tolerate, you will eventually suffer. Colonization has come home. You built a system that feeds on people and forgot that you are people. America is coming apart at the seams. I mean, from a state stability perspective, these ICE for-profit raids signal nothing but erosion of that country. Think about it. You're using 18th century wartime statutes to justify modern deportations. This is a system that's reaching backwards into antiquated powers because it has no credible forward-looking authority left. The expansion of for-profit detention centers and privatized deportation logistics. This shows you the hollowing out of the state, and that's a key marker of late-stage neoliberal decline. The state is no longer the enforcer of the law. Understand? It's the broker of violence outsourced to private capital. That parallels the historic decline of other empires that began to mercenize their security apparatuses just like Rome did before the collapse. The state becomes just a brand, not a body politic. Deploying military forces domestically against low-risk civilian populations, let's be honest, migrants, families, children, and so forth, that signals the securitization of social management. That's nothing but a hallmark of unstable regimes. It shows that the ruling class, as we all know, sees its own population, or anyway segments of its own population, as the primary threat. This also obviously deepens the fragmentation within your country. You know, sanctuary cities versus federal raids, state courts versus executive orders, DHS versus the public. All of the forces that hold the country together are fracturing. You know, when the United Nations human rights experts call the immigration policies in your country illegal, when you deport people to third countries without hearings, when your detention facilities are described in UN reports as sites of torture, sites of inhumane treatment, you've lost all normative power globally. Nobody respects you. Your whole brand is tarnished. The United States can never again call itself the beacon of liberty, except that everyone in the world will roll their eyes or they'll laugh at the sarcasm. It's increasingly seen as a rogue actor. It selectively adheres to international law only when it suits their own power, their own agenda. Well, that undermines even U.S. soft power, and it isolates America diplomatically, which you don't even think is that important, but that is a significant erosion of civilizational leadership. Then you have the rapid expansion of legal categories for exclusion, meaning if you belong to these categories, you have no legal rights, such as gang membership, undocumented status, or even just non-registration with the immigration authorities. They're doing nothing but set up the architecture of authoritarian control. That's what they're doing. This is pre-fascist legal architecture that they're setting up. Once that system is normalized, and they've normalized extrajudicial detention, indefinite holding without trial, arbitrary deportations, well, they've got all the tools they need. And they can apply those then to journalists, to protesters, to union leaders, to political dissidents, etc., etc., etc. And they will be used that way. That's how authoritarian regimes consolidate power and control, not by overnight coups, but by the slow normalization of what begins as exceptional measures. Because what did I just tell you? The private sector is authoritarian. And you all know it by your own work experience. The private sector is authoritarian. The private sector has now conquered and captured your government. So there's no way for your society to go now, except towards stricter and stricter authoritarianism. No, America is not stable. All of its coercive organs are being decoupled from law and being fused to profit. Its legitimacy is being replaced with impunity. Its population is being conditioned now to accept repression under the guise of emergency necessities for order. You know, from the perspective of the global South, from the perspective of the Muslim world, and from the perspective of any free people who are watching, we know that we're not seeing immigration enforcement. We're seeing the early collapse of the U.S. legal political structure, the whole political and legal architecture of the United States. And they're disguising it as no-nonsense governance. They're going to eat you to the bone. We're watching a case study in advanced private sector state capture. It's the state being repurposed to serve financial interests. Specifically, in this case, those who profit from incarceration, from deportation, from surveillance, from human disposability. You know, at Middle Nation, we have an index for measuring private sector capture, private sector state capture. The United States is off the charts. I mean, the legal framework of immigration has now been converted into literally a revenue stream. Every enforcement action connected to immigration, even not just to immigration, arrest, detention, removal, this isn't just a state act anymore. It's a billable event. You understand? That means the corporations now have a vested interest in shaping immigration policy, just to expand the market for more detention and more deportation. But you have to understand, what is being captured is not just policy. It's the moral function of law itself in your country. I mean, the cynicism is breathtaking. Law now just becomes a delivery mechanism for corporate profits. ICE is just a corporate interface. It's not a government agency. It's not a government agency. It's a corporate interface. Its core operations, transport, detention, surveillance, those are all being handled by private contractors, by the Geo Group, by Core Civic, BI Incorporated, private charter airlines, even fintech ankle monitoring companies, private. None of these companies are deputized, but they're the de facto operators of everything that ICE is supposed to do. ICE is just a shell. All of the corporations, that's the substance. ICE is just a logistics operator. Policy is being written by investors. Stocks spike for all of those private prison companies immediately following any anti-immigrant executive orders, any deportation orders. Investor briefings from Geo Group and from Core Civic and so on, they literally celebrate any policy shift that increases detentions and deportations. Look, this isn't correlation, this is causation. The logic of finance capital now dictates state coercion. If Wall Street sees profit in suffering, then policy is adjusted accordingly. This is capture. I mean, when the system is like this, think about it. The more harm, the more profit. Overcrowding, delayed or denied medical care, lack of translators, for example, lengthy detentions, all of this increases their margins. Denial of basic rights just lowers their overhead. Geo Group gets paid by the head per day. So releasing detainees just hurts their revenue. Respecting rights, that's financially inefficient, meaning violating human dignity is now incentivized by the business model itself. Let that sink in. The state has not failed to regulate this. This is how they regulated it. Do you understand me? See, deregulation is still regulation, but it is the state regulating its own authority out of the affairs of business. It's the state regulating its own abdication of authority in favor of business. The Trump administration shut down DHS oversight offices that investigated abuses that took place in ICE custody. Why? Because oversight impedes profit. And in America, the state has no right to do that. The state has no right to interfere in profit making. That's the final stage of private sector capture. When the captured institution itself begins to dismantle its own power in complete capitulation and submission to capital. You're conquered. You're captured. You're defeated. You are subordinate as a country. Understand this. This isn't just corruption. Capture is more than corruption. It's much more than corruption. The state no longer holds the monopoly on so-called legitimate violence. It's just the broker of outsourced violence. The elected government is no longer accountable to the people. If it ever was, it's only accountable to shareholders. There's no longer a democracy by any definition in the United States. It's a cartelized corporate security regime, just draped in constitutional vocabulary. I'm telling you, ICE is a model for post-state governance. This isn't just a case of privatization, no. This is the template for how captured states are going to govern in the 21st century. Identify a social threat, immigrants, protesters, dissidents, what have you. Monetize their containment, outsource the enforcement, eliminate transparency, and then justify everything with security. And funnel all the proceeds to shareholders. What you're seeing is the transition from public governance to corporate dominion, as clear as day. Like I said, ICE is just the prototype, but education, health, policing, even war, has already begun the same transformation inside the United States. And that, more than anything else, tells you that America is not in control of America. It's being operated by those who build the state to brutalize the population in America. That's who controls America. And that's capture. That's capture consummated. And what are you doing about it? If you're not resisting, you're colluding. If you're not protecting those who are being targeted, then you're just rehearsing to play the same role of everyone who's going to ignore you when you get targeted next. You know, if you're not trying to shut down the machinery of this abuse and oppression, then you're just standing in line waiting for when it's your turn to be abused and oppressed. I mean, let me speak plainly. If we're talking about what's going on in California, for example, well, obviously the moral high ground belongs to the resistors. Obviously, the moral high ground belongs to those who are hiding undocumented families. Obviously, all the neighbors who are forming human chains around ICE vans, you know, students who are exposing the abuse of ICE, lawyers who are fighting in court, obviously they have the moral high ground. Any citizens who are trying to pull funding from those deportation airlines, you want to ask, is this legal? You should be asking, is it just? Because legality is always the last refuge of tyranny. They will always find some kind of law, anyway they write the laws to justify their crimes. And then they'll just say they're following orders. We all know that. That's what every regime in history did that needed to have a Nuremberg trial. No, ICE is the modern day Gestapo of a privatized police state. It doesn't exist to protect the people. It exists to protect the corporate order from the people. It's an agency of fear. It's an agency of separation, of erasure. And I'm telling you again, they are marauders, and you are their loot. And unless you resist, and I'm not telling you what form your resistance should take, that's up to you, but it should exist. Because the structure that you tolerate today is the structure that you're going to be buried under in the future. Because when they come for the undocumented, if no one stands up against them about that, then they're going to come for the rest of you. And there's not going to be anybody left to file the lawsuit on your behalf. You're always very loud about the so-called oppression that happens in the Muslim world, happens in the global south, happens in Africa, happens in Asia, happens in the Middle East, and so forth. And you're always talking about how you want to come and solve all of our problems. You want to advise us. You want to tell us what to do, how to be, and so forth. Meanwhile, your country is spiraling into dictatorship, spiraling into authoritarianism, and spiraling into privatized violence. You're being policed by marauders and mercenaries. And you're literally watching with your own two eyes right now a replaying of colonial slave raids. They just came back to your own country and now they're raiding you. And you better do something about it, but I don't think you will. Because just like it was always only just talk when you used to preach to us about how you think things are supposed to be in the global south, every time that you would preach to us about democracy and liberty and human rights and all of that, it was always just talk. It never mattered to you when you talked to us about it, and it doesn't matter now when you need it to matter the most. But you never learn how to make it matter. You never learn how to mean it. You only learn how to perform it. And there's a reason why they never taught you how to mean it. Because they've always intended to do to you what they're doing to you now. And they've left you completely unprepared, completely vulnerable, completely powerless, completely defenseless.